and she's eating every shoe in the house.
Doggy daycare is the best thing ever.
Yeah? Where do you go?
A place in Guilford I dropped my dog off at.
Metro Pooch?
Nope, someone's house.
Oh, we are starting that soon because she needs.
Just like twice a week makes all the difference.
When we hike her on the weekends, she's exhausted. It's the best thing.
Yeah.
It's like my boys, though. I look for ways to tire them out, and then they behave. All right, we got a couple more minutes.
Hey, Stephanie.
Emily, have you been back to the dog park?
No, we were actually, Caleb was just asking if you've been back yet. So I don't know how long to stay away. This is all new to me.
I don't know, but there were 3 cases of they think it's kennel cough. So, and I don't know how long that infectious period is, but we're kind of staying away still.
Yeah, luckily it's been so nice, and so my dog hasn't been too cranky about it. But is it like really noticeable when your dog has kennel cough?
Well, they cough.
It's like you would know. It's not like okay.
Yeah.
We also have a COVID dog, so
input on this. Quarantine.
Right, exactly. Is it a dry cough? Is it productive?
Well, I think that the cough is like when my dog coughed, my last dog, when he got a cough, it doesn't really sound like a cough. It almost sounds like they're choking on something on and off. It's like a really strange sound. At first I was like, what is that? Okay. So, but yeah, but I've heard other people have gone and they're like, well, the Bordetella vaccine, I think, is not like 100%. So
Great.
I don't want to
think about.
Wait a little longer.
Okay. When you go back, let me know.
I will start in 1 minute. My vice chair is just logging on. So good evening, everybody. It is 7:31. So I'd like to call the Madison Public Schools Board of Education meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome back. It's been a few weeks. So we will get started with public participation. So if there are any members of the public who are here this evening and would like to speak, we welcome public comment. When speaking, we ask that you state your name and your address for the record, and we would ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please do not identify individuals or staff members or students by name. We're very happy to hear from the public, but as this is a business meeting and not a public forum, the board is not able to respond to comment. If you would like to have your comments read, please let our board secretary know, and we are not able to have the Q&A function available. All public comments must be just that, public. So Wendy, are there any members of the public that would like to speak?
There are no hands raised. Oh.
Eric is just stuck in
Oh,
attendance.
unless that's Eric Dillner Sr. Maybe we can get Eric moved over to the panelist section.
Okay, he's on as panelist.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other than that, I see no hands raised.
Nor do I. Okay, hi, Eric, welcome. And you're just, almost just in time. So no, you're just in time. Can we have a student representatives report?
Yes. So this week, okay. I thought it said I was muted. This week we had, this last week we had the senior picnic. It was split into 2 cohorts. So cohort A had their senior picnic, and then the next day, cohort B had their senior picnic. They were really nice, beautiful days. It was kind of like we had this really windy, cold day a week before, and then we get to this week where we're planning to have the picnics, and it was very nice and sunny. I got to play a lot of kickball, eat some yummy food from the school caf that they brought out for us, and some ice cream. So that was a really fun time. Everyone enjoyed it. Earlier in the day, we had a wake-up call, which usually is the band going through the hallways and playing our fight song to go and to kind of wake everyone up, get excited for the day. And instead, because you cannot have people marching through the halls with instruments, it was all outside. So through the main drive of the school in between the 2 buildings, we all opened up our windows and peeked out the windows, and we got to listen to the band play still. Also, we were informed that the administration is working on a new system for exams, because we know it's different this year. It's not going to be able to have everyone in one place, most likely. So they said that by the end of this week, they're going to have a polished plan of how we're going to do exams this year.
Alrighty, so jumping off of what Eric said, band, I'm a band member of band, so Wake Up Call was really fun because the fall kind of felt like we were missing something without the traditions of Friday football games and Wake Up Call. And even though it wasn't the same, it was still good. We also had a band and fly squad performance at the surf club on Thursday night, and it was very fun. We thought that we wouldn't be able to get to do like what we've done every year, and we were really sad that we were going to miss out on one of our favorite parts of the fall. And it was really nice to be able to do it with everyone. Lots of parents came. It was recorded and live streamed. We watched the recording in band class. It was really great fun. And then another happy note, lots of happy notes today. Wellness Wednesday, which is the new trend at hand, starts tomorrow. On Wednesdays, there will be small group meetings for one class at a time from 9:30 to 10 during the school day. So tomorrow, grade 9 will meet with school counselors and talk for that 30-minute period, but the other 3 grades and remote learners will be able to just have that time to relax, to go visit a teacher, to play a board game. We've heard exciting news for what might be going on during that 30 minutes. Mr. Becker, one of the culinary arts teachers, has mentioned that he may be baking fresh bread that would be available to students during the day. And Mr. Salutary says that it is very good bread. I've also heard of an investment and stock market club, and there's talk of the robotics lab being open to students. The big idea here is that it's non-academic time, just to like de-stress during the day. Don't go to your teacher and learn some more calculus. Go and sit down with your friends in the hallway and catch up on the latest in your friend group. Just go like have fun and take a break. And I think students are really going to enjoy that because there's a lot of stress lately. But that's it. Otherwise, yay.
Yay, it's right. I'm so glad that the sun was shining for senior picnic. I also want to inform you that all bread is good, but fresh baked bread is the best. Are there any board members who have questions for our student representatives? Galen, I see you twice. That's not a bad thing. Okay. Then moving, Oaks. Nobody? Okay. Sorry, I think I heard myself. Okay, so moving on to the interim superintendent's report. Dr. Patty Foote.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Tonight we have 3 panelists with us. And as we have seen COVID-19 cases increase in the community, I think it's a good time for us to explore what the community metrics are like, and also to hear from 2 of our school personnel about how we go about contact tracing and how we provide clarification to parents and so on and so forth. So tonight, our first panelist will be Trent Joseph. He is the Madison Director of Public Health. And Trent will talk a little bit about community metrics, a little bit about how he cooperates or works with us to conduct contact tracing, and also about community transmission or transmission of the virus based on the data that we currently have in Madison. So Trent, you have to unmute yourself. Okay.
Thanks, Gina, and I appreciate the introduction. Good evening, everyone. So where we are in Madison as of today, 11:10, at what time is it? At 7:39, we are at 245 cases. Of course, this can change before the end of the night. Cases do get uploaded in a secure portal, which is through DPH all times of the day, 7 days a week. So it's a routine checking of that portal for me. So we had 245 out of the 245 cases. We have 20 active, but I would rather put that in a range of 20 to 25. I mean, because there's possibly still some test results pending to come over the portal. And, you know, through contact tracing, at least for the town residents and what we're seeing across Connecticut, in general, we're seeing a lot of COVID transmission happen at food service establishments, either through food workers or individuals who were last exposed to indoor dining. And then from that, it's the private gatherings, private gatherings at home or with friends that are causing the uptick in cases. And then third in line would be the athletics, the youth programs, and particularly ice hockey. There was a couple of emails that came across from the Shoreline community in the region for volleyball. Volleyball is now starting to have some cases. And in between that, earlier on when the weather was a little bit warmer, we did have some baseball transmission because they were routinely traveling. And I think the fourth in line in terms of the more common exposures are linked to just close contacts where you have a spouse who either works out of state or out of town. And, that person was a close contact to a confirmed case, and then they had to quarantine at home. They end up testing positive 3 days later, and their spouse now has been with them, and they end up testing positive as well. So it's kind of a continuum of exposures that occur. And at least I want to also take this moment to discuss at least my communication with the school and how we kind of all bring it together from community to school-based. So Elizabeth has been my point of contact along with Stephanie. What we routinely do, all right, we starts off with identifying the individual and, from there identifying, what are demographics, what grade they're in, their home address, what school we're going to, and their age, some of the basic demo. And then we do a case investigation. We determine, we try to develop a timeline on when the person was last in school. We try to develop, some scope of case investigation to where they might have been exposed to last. This goes also beyond their attendance in class. We go to, bus travel, we go to childcare and extracurricular activities as well as sports. Whereas, that has been, as of late, some of our experiences where I would get notification from the sports program, and then I tie that back into Elizabeth and or Stephanie at the high school. There's been other cases where I may get a case in my portal, and I try to call the individual, and either it's going right to voicemail or they're not picking up, and I get a little worried when I see it's a case in my portal, and it's technically like a school age individual, like a parent of what a school age individual would be. and I say, hey, does this last name, is the last name in the school system at all? I try to run little background checks if the people aren't picking up, because that's the only way we're going to be able to stay on top of it and keep our hand on the pulse. And then, from the case investigation, we develop a quarantine timeline based on that last exposure. And we do that, and we do that based on priority, the priority of the individual's exposure based on how many people they can affect on that timeline of events that individual had. And from there, it's been working. But obviously, it's up to us to keep it consistent and thorough. And I just always want to take my hat off to Stephanie and Liz and Jean Ann. Essentially, we've been communicating quite frequently throughout this time, and it's been effective.
Okay, great, Trent. Thank you. These people were working a lot last night, and you'll hear a little more from our next panelist, Stephanie Lesnick. She's our nurse supervisor, and she will share how she works with parents. She's usually, or can be, the first point of contact. She's always clarifying information about quarantining. She connects with the building administrators and also the school nurses, and does some case status reporting with Dr. Battaglia, Elizabeth, as Trent referred to her. So Stephanie, can you take it away?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Dr. Pettifoot. Good evening, everybody. So to help you understand a little bit more of the role of the school nurse in this dynamic, so this position is actually something that we've been working on since the summer, since March. We've really been making a plan to how to re-enter school safely with our kids, and how to figure out how to keep them safe in the community as well as in school. A lot of this is based on education of our community and our kids, and reinforcing the practices of good hand hygiene, mask wearing, social distancing, and the social responsibility of keeping small groups for your friends and neighbors while you're in that cohort, what is the word? Anyway, not gathering in larger groups. So in the summer, we really started to work on educating people and the staff and all of these components and the students, and getting them used to new elements of how they're going to re-enter school. Part of that is really asking parents to do things that they've never had to do before, which is keeping their kids home for symptoms that weren't really something that you would keep your kids home for in the past. And I have found, as we went through summer school and we've entered school in September, parents have been phenomenal, reporting, keeping kids home for even what seems like mild symptoms, but symptoms that fall underneath the CDC list of symptoms for COVID-19 infection. That being said, we've tracked, I think in the schools, well over 500 kids since we've opened in September, and taken them through the process of whether they're symptomatic to having a test, to being negative, and to re-entering school. So we've been active in that process, and then to all the steps that Trent spoke with the communication between the health office all the way through to Trent and Dr. Battaglia, to make sure that it's disseminated up the chain of command to when we have a positive case, it coming to Dr. Pettifoot, so she understands exactly where we stand as a district in terms of the exposure and the exposure risk. And then it trickles back down to how we are going to deal with that exposure and any positive cases. I spent a lot of time in the past couple of weeks helping parents understand contact tracing. So now, instead of understanding what we're going to keep kids home for, now we're understanding contact tracing, and we're understanding really what exposure means and what it means for for our community, but for our families. And people are nervous, and people want some reassurance. So it's really the health offices we want you to know that we are here as resources for you. We're all doing this together. We're happy to help answer questions and help you talk through the process. So lean on us.
Thank you, Stephanie. Dr. Battaglia is our next panelist, and she'll discuss contact tracing and how the district identifies close contacts, what it means to quarantine as a close contact, and what happens if a person suddenly becomes positive while they're on quarantine and they haven't been in the school for more than 48 hours. So
working off of what Trent said. Once when there are positive cases, we find out either from Trent or families contact the nurse to let them know. So once when there is a positive case, Stephanie, Trent, and I work together. We let the administration know about who the student is, and all of the administrators right now, they have, even at the high school, they have seating charts for every single class, which is hundreds at the high school. So we are able to have all of this information to determine who is a close contact. So a close contact would be somebody who is within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more throughout a 24-hour period. So that is what is defined as a close contact. And it's regardless of whether or not an individual has a mask on or not. If you're within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes over the 24-hour periods, mask or no mask, you are a close contact that needs to be quarantined. I'm really proud of the team. Last night at 7:30 p.m., I heard from Stephanie that one of the school nurses had heard about a test had come back positive. And at that time, we had two options. We could have been like many districts who have been closing schools for contact tracing, but instead we went ahead, we worked with the administration, we figured out the close contacts, and we called all those families, some of them a little past 9 o'clock, but in doing so, we are able to keep school in session, and I think that is so important. And we also let them know, so if one of their children was in a class with someone who tested positive for COVID-19, they need to stay at home and quarantine. However, their other students or their other children are considered contacts of contacts, so they are able to continue at school. So that was reassuring to some families as well. It is very important that when we are quarantining as a close contact, we are staying home. I realize that quarantining is very different, especially for the younger ones. I have young children myself and think about a plan and a place that they would have. Ideally, if they have their own bathroom that they could use and their own space. And again, I realize that can be challenging in certain households. It's also encouraged if someone's quarantining to wear masks in the house. Again, it's all about reducing that risk. Now, we have had some cases where an individual may not have been in school due to the weekend or days off, or also there could have been somebody else in their family who has COVID-19, so then they are a close contact, so they need to quarantine. So we've had cases like that, and then after that 48 hours where we look for contact tracing, sometimes some of those students have then displayed symptoms or tested positive. But when we're looking to contact trace, we go from either the day the student tests positive or individual, or the day symptoms show. And we go back 48 hours to see who are those close contacts within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. And those are the individuals who are quarantined. Each day I report to the Connecticut State Department of Ed on the DPH website whether or not we have any cases in the school and whether or not the school is open. I think if, Trent, Stephanie, and I, along with the administration and the staff, if we can continue working like we have been, we can continue keeping kids in school safely. So again, like last night, I know it wasn't easy for parents to get phone call late at night saying, your child can't come in tomorrow, but by doing that, we were able to keep a school open. So, and I have to say the families were so understanding when they received the phone call. So if we can continue this contact tracing, we can continue staying in school, hopefully.
Yeah, I have to say that I think Madison is very fortunate to have these 3 highly dedicated professionals that are assisting the district with all the COVID-related matters. As you can imagine, it's like every day, there's a new twist or a new wrinkle. Or just this morning on, Trent, I was on a call with Trent with the emergency operations. And at that time, he was saying, we had 18 cases. I met with him less than 2 hours later and it had gone up to 20. So, things change. It's a very dynamic and fluid situation. Things change rapidly, but really and truly, just looking at these 3 people that are supporting what we're doing in this district. And I think as Liz alluded to, that we're lucky. We haven't had to close school for a day or 2 to do contact tracing. These people are working round the clock, over the weekend. I saw emails being exchanged over the weekend, and I just can't give enough kudos to the 3 of them. And also our administrators, our teachers, our nurses, our support staff. This is really a team effort, but they shoulder, really, these 3 individuals shoulder a lot of the burden. And kudos to them. Yes, I think they do. They actually deserve a standing ovation. Really. But I don't know if any of you have any questions for them. I know that they have long nights ahead of them and days tomorrow, but tomorrow. It's your meeting, Katie. So
well, go ahead, Greg. You were stepping in. Go ahead.
Just first of all, thank you to Trent and Stephanie and Liz for the report, and to Jean-Ann and for all the work that's happening. It's obviously greatly appreciated by everyone in the town. I'm sure all the parents in particular in the town. The question I have is sort of, what's the line? So we've heard a lot about the great work that's being done to keep schools open. How do we get to the point where that doesn't work anymore? And what does that look like? What would push us over that threshold where we wouldn't feel comfortable? Just to give folks a sense of that.
So I think I'll jump in here. For me, it would be if we don't have enough staff to really cover our classrooms. Right now, we're not allowing substitutes come in like you would normally do if we were operating under normal circumstances. We have building-based subs, and we try to cover classes, particularly at the secondary level, be it the middle school and the high school, by reassigning teachers to cover those classes if we have a staff member down. And right now, I believe it's about 36 staff members across all categories. That could be teacher, a paraeducator, a support staff person, custodian, food service employee. We have 36 people that are either out on self-quarantine, they have ADA accommodations to work remotely, or in one instance, childcare. So right now we're covering each of our classrooms, and it's with a lot of patchwork and a lot of dedication on the part of the principals when they come in the morning, look at the list that they have to cover, approaching different teachers and paras to cover classes. And I have to commend those folks because they're doing, double duty almost, and we wouldn't be able to be operational if it wasn't for that. So that's really the first situation, that as long as we have classes covered, we have students in the building, then we're going to remain open. So what I would envision happening going forward is that we may have sporadic days where we have to go full remote for a specific school, because we may have a shortage of healthy people who can come in and cover the classes. So that really would be the primary reason that we might put a school on full remote for a day or 2 or a few days. If the obvious other reason would be if we have an executive order from the governor to go full remote. I would envision, we're in hybrid at the high school, which seems to be going pretty well. And we're in, full in K-8. Obviously the schools that are in full for K-8, we could always, if we had to, phase back to a hybrid if we were finding that we were having an increase in cases and we still had coverage for staff members.
Thank you. I think that's helpful for folks to hear about.
Okay.
Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all. I feel your pain. I'm doing contact tracing for Southern, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing and understand the urgency of it. And I'm very thankful for you all and the hours that you're putting in. I'm curious about the reporting, are you getting it primarily through the state or from self-report? And what kind of lag time are you getting, Trent, for getting those positive results?
Good question, Emily. So more frequently, on average, I'm getting it through DPH, my secure portal. Right now, I'm seeing, so where are we, the 10th? So I'm seeing about a 3 to 5 day turnaround to notification. Whereas I'm seeing cases uploaded today, which is the 10th, but individuals tested on positive on November 5th or maybe November 6th, sometimes November 4th. So we're seeing that type of lag time. It all depends on the lab or essentially the healthcare facility that the individual went to get tested. It doesn't make a difference if the place where they got tested is closer to Madison. And then I feel fortunate that, you know, what's helpful is First Selectwoman Lyons, when she puts out the resident update, and it has a little blurb about call the health department if you get a positive result. That has helped in the past. I've had, I've came to work on Thursday morning with voicemails of a positive case, and then I have good communication with the Shoreline health directors, so that's where I get a lot of the out of town exposure due to sports. I get that really quickly, and then I just respond to them expeditiously with Stephanie and Elizabeth.
Thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate it.
Katie, I have one question. So I know that there's, with Thanksgiving coming up and kids coming home from college and coming back from hotspot states, are we putting out any guidance on if you have a family member who's coming to you from a hotspot state who lives with you? Not necessarily, I know it's hard to say for people hosting Thanksgiving or going to Thanksgiving. We can't really put, I don't think, guidance around that. But if you have a college kid coming back from one of those states, do the people within that family have to quarantine or anything, or should they quarantine until they get a negative test? Is there any kind of guidance that we're putting out around that, or that's sort of out of our realm?
That's a good question. Sorry, I didn't get your name.
Oh, it's Happy Marino.
Happy. So essentially, so there's good and there's bad to that. So I believe we may, I think First Selectman Lyons will put something up regarding that for people who are returning back from college. The other thing too is some colleges like Sacred Heart, they are closed, for the remainder of the semester. They're not allowing students to come back. That's what a lot of universities are doing over the span of the Thanksgiving break. After the end of this week, or if not by already, they already moved out and not coming back until next semester.
Diane?
I have a couple of questions. Can you hear me okay? Okay, so my first question is, if a student is a college student and they come home to Madison and they test positive for COVID, are they counted as a positive COVID case in the college town where they were tested and in Madison, or is it just one? I'm just curious if you know the answer to that. And I forgot my other question, but I'll think of it.
That's a good question. The answer is yes. That counts as a Madison case if the individual has Madison on their license or their ID card. It tallies up to Madison. And to be quite honest with you, to circle back about the active cases in town, we actually have 22 active cases, but 2 of the cases are staying on campus out of state. So we technically only have 20 active in town. I don't count the 2 who are out of state or residing out of town in terms of active, but it goes to the tally. It doesn't go to our active cases.
I remember the other question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry, Diane.
When you get the results from the Department of Public Health, or when people call in and say, "Oh, I've tested positive for COVID-19," do they know what test they had, and what tests are you considering to be accurate enough to count as positive or negative? Because I know there was something about if you got one type of test, it wasn't counting, but another type of test did, and I'm just a little curious.
Yep, and Stephanie, if you want to talk, because I know we had talked about it. Now we are taking the PCR test and not the antigen test. So Stephanie, if you want to talk a little more about that.
So when we originally started back to school, we did accept either what is commonly called a rapid antigen test. It's often referred to just as a rapid test, or we would accept a PCR test. And as there was a period of time where PCR tests were very hard to come by and the turnaround time was quite lengthy, we were accepting rapid tests. That being said, we've gotten to a point where PCR testing turnaround, as Trent said, can be 2 to 3 days. And commonly that's what we're seeing right now, the 2 to 4 day window. And so we have, based on guidance with the state, taken PCR testing to be what we want to be our kind of gold standard for testing. And if you do have a rapid test done, we ask that you follow it up with a PCR test to either confirm a positive or to confirm a negative.
And this goes for students and staff.
Correct.
Right, and for residents, usually reporting is the PCR. That's what I usually get through the portal.
Are people told like what tests they're getting? Like if you have symptoms and you go, like you just go to the lab that your insurance company tells you to go to and they test you, like how do you even know?
It does. Sorry, go Trent.
But I mean, we can't forget a lot of these tests come with doctor order. So the physician would obviously who specializes and essentially selects what tests for you to get based on the clinical evaluation. But generally they're scheduling a PCR test. It's actually 2 to 3 days to get in to get a PCR, and then we're getting a turnaround of the results another 2 to 3 days later after that.
And we've been notifying, staff, and I know when the nursing staff talks to anyone, we mentioned about the PCR testing. We had sent out guidance about that from the nursing office as well, that they should take the PCR test. And one thing too, if you go on to even CVS right now to sign up for testing, you can choose which test, the antigen or the PCR. So as we have sent out guidance, and then we're also following up and reminding people to take the PCR test.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Katie. First, I would just echo my thanks for the work that you're doing. I know this is exhausting work and it's greatly appreciated. A question I've gotten from parents myself, and I was hoping you could maybe offer some thoughts on this, is really about the process for contact tracing. And Liz brought up the point about having seating charts. A question I hear from parents often is, if my child is already seated 6 feet away from the case next to him, doesn't that automatically rule out the need to do contact tracing if they're already seated 6 feet apart? I was wondering if you could just speak to that question.
Yeah, so we do have where they're seated, but there's also the teacher knows, are these certain individuals together for a tiered group? Were they eating lunch together? So it does go beyond just the classroom in terms of contact tracing. I can tell you in terms of the elementary case, we did quarantine the class due to the fact that there was that movement and the playground and other areas that we couldn't specifically identify who should be and who should not. However, in terms of the other grade levels at the middle school and the high school, we were not quarantining the whole class. We were able to identify who in that class was a close contact. So we are going to look at everything. And yes, it's not, we're just going to quarantine a whole class if that's not warranted. As a special ed director, the best place for students is in school. So, I definitely look to keep students in school. But there's, buses, recess, lunch, tiered intervention, and there's a lot of different activities that at those times, if one of the staff identified that they were close contact, then that could be the reason why that student is quarantined. In addition, for the students who are older, we do ask them as well as part of the process to give us information to help us with quarantining.
We also have before and after school care, which, was, had to be considered for the case last night.
Thank you.
I have a question as well.
Go ahead, Violet.
Are the bus seats assigned? Those students that take bus to school or busing?
No, to my knowledge, they're not assigned.
And so how would contact tracing occur for those students?
Did you want to address that, Liz?
So in terms of the bus, so we know that certain students, depending on their ages, may be at different parts of the bus. We also have cameras on our bus. So we're able to see where students are, so that way we can identify. I know that when we've had students who are potentially, we're waiting for a case, I'll get the bus number, I'll get the entire list. And it also depends on, are they on the bus for 15 minutes? So a student may be the last stop, and so therefore they would not have been on for 15 minutes. But that's definitely where cameras and also the bus route. So it's really, once we go and start these investigations, it's every department, all hands on deck of all the information that we can get, so we can quarantine the appropriate people and not quarantine people or individuals who don't need to be quarantined, so they can continue coming to school in person.
Thank you very much. And I know that is a lot of work, so I do appreciate all your efforts. Thank you.
Thanks, Violet.
So I just want to reiterate and echo everybody's gratitude for the work that you all are doing. The landscape is changing constantly and has been for the better part of a year. So I'm grateful to all of you for your expertise on this topic and for doing everything you can to keep us all safe. My question is somewhat elementary compared to all the other great questions that have been asked tonight, but you talked a little bit about the siblings of a contact, right? And obviously those siblings will not have to quarantine, but and I assume I know the answer to this, but I just want to be clear because I know it's been asked a lot in the community. A sibling who has tested positive, their family is expected to quarantine. Is that correct?
Yes. So if a student is a close contact of another individual at school, they're a contact of their siblings are contacts of contacts, which is minimal risk. I know when Stephanie and I were calling families last night, we let them know if, the student who's a close contact develops any symptoms or goes to get tested. I did ask the courtesy if you could consider keeping all your children home at that point. And so if then a child tested positive, then the siblings would be close contacts themselves. However, we have not been seeing school to school transmission. Per Tom St. Louis from the state, DPH, we have so many mitigating strategies in place. So when we don't have our masks on, we have social distancing. We have barriers. So even though there were multiple cases reported on Monday, none of those cases were connected. It just happened to be a coincidence. I don't know, Stephanie, if you have anything to add to that, but they do say schools are a safe place to be because of all the mitigation strategies. And in Madison, we were able to put many of these strategies into place. And I'm very proud of everything we were able to purchase that would make our schools a safe place. And Steph, if you have anything to add.
The only thing I would say, Liz, is my conversation with parents when they are nervous and frustrated, I do reiterate the importance of all the things that we're doing in school being carried out outside of the walls of the school. Something is happening right inside the schools, the kids, the teachers. I've been impressed since day one when we started summer school. They're cooperative, they follow the rules, they are doing exactly what we need to do to stay well in school and stay open. And so I'm asking them, now that our community levels have risen a little bit, don't forget that we need to do that in the community as well, in your homes, and to change your habits a little bit at home. So that's my big message.
Absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
true.
And one more question that I know I've heard asked a lot, is if you are in a cohort or in your contact tracing, you will get a phone call from one of the three of you or the principal, or can you just go through that process a little bit? I know parents oftentimes will hear or read the letter that you notify and say, is it my kid? Can you just talk a little bit about that to reassure people?
So we do
improved the letter too. We've improved the letter to include that now, but go ahead, Liz.
So we do a thorough investigation, including thinking of anyone who may be in that room that typically would normally not be in that classroom, interventions, related arts, special education. So we do go through everything and interview all the staff, and again, at students if that's appropriate age, to figure out who those close contacts. And if you are a close contact, you are contacted. So if a parent is not contacted, their child is not considered a close contact. And one thing kind of going along with that is, we're not always, it's not always a full classroom that is being quarantined. We do have, in some rooms, the desks are not 6 feet away. In some, they may be 6 feet or farther. So it's really, we are going through all of these factors to make sure we're keeping everybody safe and to make sure we can stay in school. So please, if they're not getting a phone call, it's because they have not been identified as a close contact.
And I would just like to reiterate that the letter doesn't go out until we know everyone has been contacted. So sometimes, like the letter today, it went out a little bit later for other reasons about last night, but I don't send the letter out or do the e-notification until I know. I get confirmation, usually from Liz, that, she's the contact person for usually Stephanie and Trent, although sometimes I'm on those emails as well. But until she says, yep, we're good to go, you can send it, it doesn't get sent until then.
Thank you. Emily?
I have one last question, sorry. For the students, the close contacts who are required to quarantine, do you monitor them over the course of their quarantine? And do you require a negative test for them to exit quarantine and return to school?
That's a great question. Steph, do you want me to answer it? Do you want to answer that in terms of the negative test? Because I feel like a medical professional based upon all of the training, but you're the actual medical professional. So I'll let you.
You don't just play one on TV.
Yeah, fill the blanks where I missed things, Liz. So we are not requiring a test to return out of quarantine. You can be tested multiple times, and we've had people who have tested negative multiple times during a 14-day quarantine, and they still need to do the quarantine. So there's no testing out of quarantine. Therefore, we're not going to require it. What we do say to people is, if you're asked to quarantine, Emily, we ask them to go ahead and just ask their pediatrician. Different pediatricians are having different views, or medical providers at any level. They have different views about what they want their patient population to do. Some choose to test immediately, so the baseline going into quarantine. Some would like to wait 5 days post-exposure, because that's the average date, the average day of onset of symptoms post-exposure. And some are testing right at the end to find out, okay, are you negative at the end of your quarantine period? And some are saying, we're just going to test if you're symptomatic. So really, we're not going to require anything. If you have any testing done on your child while they are quarantined, we ask that you do submit that to us, just so that we have it documented. And in terms of following up with our families, I know my personal practice is to just touch base. I know it's emotional. I know it's a hard thing for people to have a family member quarantined, to be nervous about them. Maybe they have multi-generational families living in the home. So I do just shoot an email or a phone call once or twice during the quarantine to check in on them and let them ask any questions, because as we all know, questions trickle out later, and 2 o'clock in the morning, you get all your questions in your head and you think, oh, I wish I asked that. So I do try to circle back with people.
And what we're following is the guidance that we're getting from the State Department of Ed and Department of Public Health. So, that question, Dr. Patty Foote, Stephanie, Trent, myself, we're on with them every single week, getting these updates and people asking all of these questions. So we are keeping what our practices are aligned with what the state is providing to us, that, you know, you cannot test out of quarantine. It is those 14 days. So we're definitely trying to keep aligned with all of the state guidance as it changes every week.
Right.
Thank you.
And to Liz's point, this morning, the phone calls are usually 8 o'clock in the morning. They're our standard standing appointment is 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, 8 to 9 o'clock. And this morning, the 4 of us were on, as well as about 390 some odd other people. So, and it has really grown. There's been like maybe 75 to 100. And today, I think, was the largest group. So
Yeah.
It's a sign of the times.
Any other board member questions? I hope you all will be regular visitors to our meeting. This was really, really very helpful, and helped to answer a lot of our questions. So, and I know questions that the community has had. So I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely.
Katie, I just had a thought, and this is just an idea, but
I like
I think there
thoughts.
was so much good information here that maybe we could take a look and just like produce an FAQ out of the recording that we can post on the website. I just think there was just a lot of amazing information.
I agree. And Happy, I can tell you, and I know Zoe's on the call, but she is really masterful at picking up these questions and adding them to our FAQ. In fact, I got the answer to somebody's question off of them today. So yes, so if you can hear me, that would be awesome if we could use some of this information to update our website.
Problem. We can look into that.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I would just like to say that Gail Darling-Hinch had mentioned today, actually to me, and I think she mentioned to Liz and to Zoe, that it would be great if we would put some FAQs up about questions around quarantine. So kudos to Gail, because she was on to that earlier today. So we certainly will do that, Happy. It's a great suggestion, and it's in the works. I think I heard Zoe chime in, and that's great. It's a wonderful team here, and I think Dr. Cook is inheriting a great team here and a great school district. So I think we're on a good path.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all. I know you were all up late last night, so if you would like to be excused, and I am remiss in letting both Eric and Isabel, our student representatives, know that if they would like to be excused on this school night, they are also definitely able to do that at any time. So Jeannie Ann, you have something else on item 4.2.
Yes, and thank you again to Trent and Liz and to Stephanie. I know if you have to move on, I understand. So recently, the Commissioner of Education, Miguel Cardona, issued guidance to school districts regarding remote learning days that are approved for this year for weather-related issues. So I had the conversation recently, as recent as yesterday, as a matter of fact, with Dr. Cook when he was in district, and we discussed the topic and we landed in the same place. And basically, we discussed the fact that we will evaluate, at least during my tenure, and then when he takes over, we'll evaluate each of the weather-related situations on a day-by-day basis, because as I learned earlier with Tropical Storm Isai, is that, we had sporadic and then power outages, then we had continued power outages. And I think that's what's unique about Madison, is that you may have some heavy snow in one area, you may have ice in another area. We seem to get strong winds here, and for whatever reason, trees come down and wires come down. So it would really be unfortunate to have a remote learning day when maybe a quarter or half of our students can't access the remote learning, or even some of our staff. So we will craft an e-notification message for our parents and for our staff, and that would probably be coming out in about a week or less, depending upon what happens with COVID over the next few days. So I just wanted to alert the board to that, and also anyone that's tuning in, and I'll try to get that weather-related information out as soon as we can.
Diane.
I have a quick question that sort of plays off of that. So even when we don't have like a large storm, sometimes there are small areas within Madison that gets like a power outage or a tree limb down or whatever the case is. And I was just wondering, like, what is the proper protocol to handle that situation? I know personally, we had a weird power outage, and whenever we have a power outage, our internet goes down and it takes much longer for that internet to come back up. So my daughter was remote learning, and it was like, well, who do I call? Who do I contact? She was supposed to have a quiz. So do I email the teacher? Is there a way to contact the teacher to let them know that she's coming in late? Will she get more time? Like the whole situation was just kind of up in the air. And so I just want to know from the administration side, what is the proper protocol for the student and the parent to handle that so that the teacher is aware and the school is aware that they're not skipping class, that they're not coming in tardy for a wrong reason.
Hopefully, if you have some kind of a device that's working, a phone, you know, an iPhone or some type of an Android, just to email the teacher and let the teacher know. And then whatever the normal channel is for you to notify the high school that, you know, your child, your daughter is unable to participate due to a power outage. If we know about it, we usually, like Bill McMinn, if he knows about something like this in advance, he'll let us know. But, you know, like you said, there can be sporadic outages, and until students or someone contacts us, we won't know, or the school won't know. So it's always best to start with the teacher. And then, you know, if you need to go above that, maybe it's the assistant principal or the principal. You can always, I suppose, you can always let the superintendent know, and then I would let the school know, because that should be an excused absence for sure.
So in my case, I called the main office line, and they directed me to the attendance line where I left a message. And then I saw on the Infinite Campus that they marked her as like an excused absence for a certain number of classes, even though she was there, because she ended up being able to log in. And then we did email the teacher, but I just didn't know if there was like a particular policy that was kind of like for all of the schools, or if each school is going to be different.
I don't know if it's the same at each of the schools, but I would always start with the teacher and then, you know, go up the rank. If they have an attendance procedure, you follow the attendance procedure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the superintendent's report? No? Okay, moving on to board member comments. Any board members? Greg.
I have two. They're really just questions. I'm just curious about them. So speaking of weather-related outages, so Ryerson was closed recently and not Brown. And I'm curious to hear more about that. I assume maybe the facilities committee would hear more in the future. And specifically, I'm curious, is it related to the condition of the, you know, facility itself? Like, you know, I know we have a lot of school renewal thoughts coming up. And is this something that was isolated to Ryerson because of Ryerson, or was it some other anomaly?
So what happened was there are 3 lines that go into Ryerson, and a tree came down and took down one of the lines. So we had some power in the building, but because if you recall that particular day, that was when we were in our little cold spell, and the temperature in that building was dropping precipitously. I was on with Bill McMinn, and I asked him to go up there, and I wanted him to check, or have the custodian check the temperature in the rooms, in all of the rooms. And we found that there were 4 teachers that we relocated. And I think it was, you know, around 11 o'clock. And he said, you know, it's really getting below what I think is a healthy, or a safe, I don't want to say safe, but, you know, a comfortable threshold for students. And so that's why the decision was made rather late. And we had to make it for the 12:15, even though I thought the message would go out at 11:15, but I guess that was a little bit delayed. And some parents only had 45 minutes. But the reason that it had to be made at that particular time was because we needed the buses to be ready to go to the high school for dismissal. So it was isolated to Brown, and it was a tree on one of the 3 wires that go into the building.
Okay. And the other question I have is, so tomorrow is Veterans Day, and I know we often hear good things about the wonderful programming that's happening at the schools, most often including members of the community who are veterans. And I'm just curious to hear, I know obviously that can't be normal this year, but are there any plans of remembrance regardless?
Yes, there are plans for remembrance, and if something doesn't go out from me tomorrow, or I would imagine the schools will be sending out, but there are definitely plans tomorrow. And I thought about it maybe half an hour ago when we were getting off policy, and I asked Zoe to collect that information, and then I was not able to touch base with her, even though she's not too far from the office, about that. It had slipped my mind because there were some other things that I was dealing with today. But yes, we definitely will be remembering the veterans, and I know the schools have things planned.
Thanks. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Diane, I knew I saw somebody else's hand up. Go ahead.
I have actually two questions, and the first is I was just wondering what the status is on the fan on the roof of the high school, and I don't know if you want to answer that first, and then I'll get to my next question. Or okay.
It's been fixed, and they're using the bridge.
Okay, and then my second question, which Isabel might be able to address as well. So I had brought up previously the fact that although every student has a Chromebook and they've been using that to live stream their classes when they're remote, that there was an issue about being able to do multiple things at one time, where the teacher would ask you to watch a video and have another program open while live streaming, and then that was challenging for the Chromebooks to handle. And Art had talked about it as well. And so I'm wondering if there has been any more thought on this or any more improvements made, because like I know, for instance, today, my daughter was using my computer and her Chromebook because she live streams using my computer so that she can use her Chromebook for all the work that the teachers want them to do when they're remote. But my computer crashed. And so she was left with just the Chromebook, and she had difficulty getting back on and doing things until we fixed it. So she's lucky enough to have a second device at home. Not everyone is going to have that. And so I'm wondering, what we're going to do to make sure that access is equal to all students, so that if they only have that Chromebook, how are they going about doing their assignments while streaming?
So I see that Art, his mic is off, but I'm hoping that he's there, and I see him coming to life again. I think it's probably a question for Art.
Well, I think, Diane, we had a conversation about the capabilities of the Chromebook. There's a number of issues that come into play. It's not just the Chromebooks. It can be the bandwidth at someone's house. I don't believe we're having any bandwidth issues to speak of in the schools, fortunately. But again, I think that the solution is going to be probably balancing how the assignments are given. I think it's something for instructional folks to work on. I know that there's a number of concerns about Chromebooks just not being as powerful as Windows devices like laptops that are much more capable of multitasking at the same time. And I think that for the most part, you can't expect a $250 or $300 device to perform like a $800 laptop or desktop or more. So I think that the Chromebooks are very, very decent machines. They're I would say that we're certainly not on the low end of the Chromebook spectrum with the Hewlett-Packard machines that we've got. But I don't think that we can expect a whole lot more. I was under the impression that most of the processing concerns were, in fact, when multiple tasks were trying to happen there. So I don't really see much of a solution in that regard, but there's multiple reasons why there can be some problems with resources, and a lot of that can be, just the CPU power, the processor power in a Chromebook. We're not the only district that's facing anything like this. I'm looking at the statewide listserv that K-12 technology directors participate in, and there's a lot of instructional people on there as well. We're certainly not alone in that. I think that the expectation has to be managed for the teachers also. And, you know, there's discussions, obviously, and I'm sure there's some strategies as to how they make the assignments, you know, how they present the assignments and expect them to be completed.
Thank you, Art. So I guess this is going to be something for Gail and for curriculum and student development to take a look at then, at how the assignments are being given, because I know that the demand, I think, is too much for the Chromebooks, and it's standard. I think it's across the board, at least with the high school. And I think Isabel had mentioned that she knew many other students were doing the same thing, where they were using a second device. And it's just, I just want to make sure that the access is equal for all the students, that for those who don't have a second device, that they're not still struggling with the technology. And so I think then it has to be addressed at the teacher level, and how they're assigning their work.
And we can also take a look at, you know, exactly what it is that's happening when these things, when these problems come up. I'm not sure if there's some common thread, but well, the only common thread I know is that it's during multitasking. And as I said, it's not like we've bought some low-end machines here. So, you know, we can revisit again if anybody else wants to chime in. If I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if I don't even know if Isabel wants to report on it, that's fine. But you know, I mean, we're aware of this, and it's just not much of a solution.
Well, yeah, sure. I just came back upstairs, but from what I've heard, it sounds exactly like what Mr. Sickle was describing. It's when people try and have a Google Meet open and a Go Formative. That's by far the biggest issue.
Right.
And the two they don't work so well together, but every teacher has been very accommodating, and every student figures it out. I think it's been working pretty good. It took the first couple of weeks where teachers didn't know if they should tell the kids to leave the Meet or not, but now we've got that sorted out.
So most of the time the teachers are saying you enter the Meet, then you leave the Meet to do your work, and then you come back in. And there's,
yep.
Okay.
And those two tasks would be quite resource intensive. So I can see where those two would be consistently problematic.
Can I follow up on this with a question? And it certainly sounds like it spans perhaps multiple committees, or maybe just a further board conversation. But it feels like, you know, even as this continues, and, you know, it feels like this to me. It feels like this is not the end of this conversation just with these two applications, for example, because there will no doubt be more things that folks need to use that are resource intensive, you know, as this situation continues of remote work. So I'm curious, especially as we enter budget season, about having a conversation about, especially at the high school level, do we have the devices that we need in place, and or do we have the sort of either not policies, that's probably the wrong word here, but practices and norms in place that ensure that there's consistent access and use for all students. And it feels like that's persisting here a little bit. And I'm wondering if we could maybe get a bigger update about it at a future board meeting. And if it makes it, you know, if we're in this situation, just to put the words out there, if we're in a situation where we need to start saying, well, maybe if we're going to continue having remote work for some time in some format, and I think it's even been raised earlier, the idea that, you know, even when we're not in a remote format, there may be home use of Chromebooks and things like that. Are Chromebooks the right device for the high school, for example? Seems like a conversation that would be worth having sooner rather than later.
Any other board member comments? I have a few things to report on. I attended the high school PTO meeting today, and there were 85 participants there. It was a great board meeting. I know it was recorded. So for anybody who's interested, there's a lot of great information there. Galen, I'm going to put you on the spot because I also attended the Board of Selectmen meeting this week where they discussed the solar carport project. So I know that they have chosen a vendor to work with and they're working on, so just pipe in if I'm missing anything. I know they've chosen a vendor and the work will begin. They're working on approving the contract.
That's correct, right? We
sort of stealing my report later, but
well, I think that Bill McMinn wrote a really good letter to the selectmen, and Scott, you could probably fill in the details better than I.
So I'll stop taking your thunder, Selectman Murphy, and move on to the next thing. I wanted to remind the board that Dr. Cook is very much looking forward to meeting with each of us. You can reach out to Wendy with your availability and she will schedule that or work with us to schedule that. I had an opportunity to meet with him and I know Dr. DeSantis did as well. So he's waiting on the rest of us. What else? CABE is having a webinar series on December 2nd and 7th in, I can hear myself.
Galen's got a mute.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay. And that is to replace the normal CABE conference that we try to attend every fall. So if you're interested, please check that out. You can register or ask Wendy if you're interested in registering. They are all going to be remote. And then finally, I know many of you know that I am stepping down as chair. I have submitted my letter of resignation as chair effective December 2nd. It's been an honor to serve as the chair for the past 3 years, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing my service on the board and being an active and engaged member moving forward. So I will transition out with Dr. Pattyfoot, and we will usher in a new executive committee with Dr. Cook in December. So that were my comments. Are there any other board member comments? Oh.
Thank you. I would just like to thank you for all your outstanding commitment and heart that you've shown in serving the community. Nobody's put more of herself out there for the schools or the students. And you've successfully navigated the board through some of the most challenging issues or events imaginable over the last year and a half, 2 years. And yet you successfully led the board to fulfill its most important function, which is finding a new superintendent, not to mention a great interim. So really thank you very much, Katie.
Okay.
I'd echo that, Katie. It is no small feat what you've done, and can't thank you enough for this. And I'm eager to have you on the board with the rest of us and just be one of the normals for a little bit and take a load up. So thank you.
Thank you. It's really been a pleasure to work with all of you in this capacity, but Emily and Galen have been a huge support and I'm grateful to you both. Okay, so let's move on to, I'm lost, sorry. Committee reports, curriculum and student development.
Thank you. We did not meet. Our next meeting is next Tuesday at 5:30. I hope to see everybody there.
Wonderful, thank you. Communications, Emily.
No report. We have not met.
Thank you. Facilities, Tom.
No report. We've not met. Our next meeting is Tuesday the 17th at 6:30.
I think we just built your agenda.
I heard some elements of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance committee, Happy.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna read it because I wrote it down after our meeting. So we met tonight. We discussed some board members had requested some information about legal fees. paid over the past 5 years. So we discussed those, and we have that information, and we will share that with the whole board. And also around any settlement information for special ed specifically. So we will share that information with the board when we have it. We also discussed the budget calendar and voted to put forward to the full board for adoption. I did send that out to the board, but I was in transit from Stanford, so I apologize right after our meeting. So I just got it to everybody when we were here. So we can either vote to adopt that calendar tonight, or we can do it at the next meeting. If we vote to adopt it tonight, it's not on the agenda, so I would have to make a motion to add it to the agenda. The only change to the calendar that I had sent you guys before is that the day of the week on the 27th had been incorrectly labeled, and it now is changed to read Friday, which is the actual day of the week. We'll come back to that in a sec. We discussed the budget assumption document. We also updated the salary increase obligations on the document, so we understand what they are as a percentage of the total budget for this year. So if we were to do nothing else, no additions, no subtractions, contractually, we're obligated to increase 1.48% over this year's budget, which is an important thing to note. And we also added in the salary and program figures that had been proposed. We discussed the proposed IT position and contractual versus permanent. And Heather indicated there might be some issues with a long-term contractor due to collective bargaining. We had a brief discussion of the other additional positions. We talked about the fact that the math intervention program was not feasible to be sort of combined with the ESY program because of the different nature of both of those programs, and that the $25,000 for that program would cover approximately 15% of the at-risk elementary cohort for math. And Gail, correct me if I have that wrong, but I think that's right. And then we talked at length.
Actually, math and ELA.
Math and ELA. Okay, so 15% of the elementary cohort that would be at risk for both of those. So it would just be Madison, like a summer intervention, not a math intervention. So
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
We talked at length about the food services program and the potential shortfall. We have it in next year's budget assumptions, but we actually did talk a little bit about the shortfall to this year's budget. From the figures that Art has, given our current situation with full-time K-8 and hybrid high school, we can anticipate a 40,000 per month kind of shortfall. It's something to keep in mind. And we talked about the fact that we would know in February or March if we had to make any moves to kind of cover that shortfall. But that was in the context of understanding what we need to put in place for next year. So with all of that, we can certainly vote to adopt the budget calendar if you all feel that you've had enough time to look at it. But I need to make a motion to add it to the agenda.
You don't need to move to add it to the agenda if you just want to make the motion to adopt it.
Okay, I want to make sure, well, I guess we can do that in comments. So can I have, can I make the motion to adopt it, Greg, or do I need somebody on the committee?
Go ahead.
Okay, I make a motion to adopt the budget calendar. And I don't need a second, right? Because it comes out of committee.
That's right.
You do not.
Okay, so discussion. So if you guys don't feel that you've had enough time to look at it, it's a good time to speak up.
I've not looked at it.
Haven't had a good chance to look at it either.
You haven't had a chance to look at it.
Like,
I'm sorry,
briefly,
Katie,
but I'm not really sure what day you were saying was corrected, so.
The calendar that I sent 2 weeks ago was the exact same calendar that or 2 weeks, whatever our last meeting was, that we have today. The only thing is that on the old calendar, it dated that November 27th was listed as, I think, a Thursday, and it's actually a Friday. So they just changed the name of the day. Other than that, it's the exact same.
And if I understand correctly, while we're discussing it, that the main thing for the board to be aware of is that on the 5th, the 12th, and the 19th of January, we would have a sequence as needed of those dates.
Yes.
Just like we do every year of budget discussion. So I think that's to me, that's the main thing. I read it.
Yeah, it's the same calendar that you've had for 2 to 3 weeks. It just, there was the change was updating the day of the week.
Yep.
So the date is the 27th, which is the day after Thanksgiving.
That is a Friday, yes, after Thanksgiving on that particular, that's just the one action item on that day.
Well,
So on that, hold on one sec, on that day, the district budgets are entered into the accounting system. There's nothing that we have to do. It's just that they have to enter it into the accounting system by that date.
Okay. I have another proposal. Can we change the language and not refer to it as assumptions and perhaps maybe a wish list or something?
Yes, we can certainly do that, but that's separate from the budget calendar. So
Okay.
we can talk, so this is what we're adopting is not the assumptions. We don't vote on the assumptions. That's just a discussion point. What we're just voting on is the calendar itself.
Okay, I'm ready to vote on the calendar then, as long.
yeah, I'm okay.
Everybody's good? Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, you can't see me. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion passes. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Happy. Is that it? End of report? Did we lose
Yeah.
Happy?
Yes,
Oh,
sorry,
there
I
you are.
muted again. Yep,
No, that's
end of
fine.
report.
You're
Thanks.
done. Okay, no problem. Thank you. Personnel Committee.
I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Policy Committee.
We've got stuff to report. The
Wow, we do.
first thing I will note as you scroll through is that you have first reading of 4 policies that are amended or adjusted. So you have policy 1150, policy 1160, policy 1170, and then policy 4118.14. You heard about all of these at the last meeting. We had discussions about these at the previous policy meeting to tonight's meeting. So these should be somewhat familiar, but they're also just a first reading. So they're in your packet for review. We've heard no comments on those so far. You similarly have 4 rescissions that have been proposed. So policy 1000, 1312, 1316, and 1350 are all first readings of rescissions. Those are all pretty straightforward and have been described last time as well. These are all that I've just described coming out of the Shipman and Goodwin and Wendy and Jean Ann review of our policies that have not been reviewed in quite some time. So this is standard stuff that you've been seeing over the past 6 months or so. So all that's out there for first reading. We also had a meeting tonight, and I will discuss that along with the items that are up for second reading. We discussed further recommended amendments, I guess I'll call it, for policy 9400, which is organization of the school board, 9410, board organizational meeting, and 9420, board officers. So these amendments were further adjustments beyond those that were recommended on 1020 by the policy committee. So what you got was a very nicely color-coded document from Wendy. Thank you, Wendy, for doing that and helping us follow along. Anything you see on that policy that's in red, on those 3 policies, I should say, that is in red or is in blue, is something that's already been recommended by the board by the committee at the previous committee meeting. The purple items on there are all recommendations made by Shipman, as I've described, following their review of these 3 proposals. And the committee discussed and recommended unanimously that the board further revise the 3 policy revisions under consideration for 9400, 9410, and 9420 to include the purple suggestions on the documents from Shipman and Goodwin. So basically, at this point, the documents as you have them, no matter what the color is of the writing, are where these stand for your review as we have second reading. We also had discussion, and really the only other item from the meeting was discussion regarding the policies in general and how to approach further conversation about these policies as they are complicated. We had a recommendation that the board hold a retreat that would include hopefully Dr. Pattyfoot and Dr. Cook attending to allow for further policy consideration and conversation. And as committee chair, I asked Katie that if possible, a retreat be, first of all, solely dedicated to this topic, because I think it's a separate topic from any retreat that we might have after Dr. Cook's entry into the district, and if possible, for it to be held before the 12/1 BOE meeting 3 weeks from now. Obviously, that's complicated as well, but I think I agree wholeheartedly that it would be helpful to have a conversation as a group about this in probably workshop format or something similar like a retreat. So that both of those things are out there. You have all the information in front of you. I believe that's the end of the report, but at the same time, I'm sure there's discussion that folks are interested in having at this point. We did limit the discussion during the meeting to the 4 people who are members of the committee. So with apologies to anyone that was not able to participate, Diane, this may be a time where folks want to jump in with any thoughts about anything that I've presented and a report.
Any comments? Diane.
So I was looking at, hang on one second, 9410. And my comment was regarding the first section where it talks about the organizational meeting shall be the second regularly scheduled board meeting each November. And I happen to note that we are in November and we only actually have 1 board meeting scheduled in the month of November. So I think maybe the wording on this should be amended, or I mean, I don't know how many times this will happen that there won't be a second meeting in the month of November, but perhaps, you know, an alternate wording for that.
I can respond to that directly. And I couldn't before, but I think I'm wondering, Diane, just for the sake of keeping track of where each policy is, I'm wondering if you could bring that comment again to the retreat or workshop or whatever it's going to be called, so that we could consider a bunch of changes all at once. I will also remember that makes a lot of, I think everyone's in agreement that makes a lot of sense, but just to make sure we don't lose track of. So Wendy doesn't have to add a 4th color, I should say.
So Greg, would you prefer us to discuss these in the retreat than here?
It's totally everybody's call. You know, we're in a second reading. As was raised earlier, you know, the 3rd reading is December 1st. That doesn't mean that that's when we have to vote. So we also have time potentially, but it is a possible time to vote. So
Okay.
in other words, it's open to talk about whenever you'd like, Happy.
I'm just curious for 410, like, I don't actually understand the point of the changes in the first paragraph. Why would we not leave the first paragraph as is, given what Diane just said? So what's the difference? That's what I'm asking you.
I think you're kind of right. It's looped back around to some extent to what it originally was. I do think so. Shipman in the purple language,
yeah,
is really more specific, and that was actually one of their recommendations, if I have it right. And Jeanne, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were suggesting that we stay closer to the statute language. So I think that's one of the reasons for the adjustment at this point. There's not really a major change in terms of the content or the ideas.
Okay, so if we went back to the original, it would basically mean the same thing as what they put into the purple. It just would be they clarified further with the chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary, right?
Yeah,
okay.
I think largely that's the case, yes.
Okay, that's it. Just wanted some clarification on that.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just wondering why all the his, her was changed to their.
That's
my favorite part.
That is a great question. So I reported on this in my original proposal, and that is now standard format for MLA and APA writing, as is in many languages globally. So that is a shift that's been made, and we are adopting such shifts as we update policies to
I like it.
adhere to that. You have to complain to the MLA or the APA. I can't help you with that one.
Greg,
just sounds grammatically incorrect.
Just for the members of the public who might not have any idea what we're talking about, could you just give a brief overview? We do have 6 attendees here, and our selectmen who it just might be helpful so that they're not out of the loop entirely.
Let me start by editorializing a bit and saying, I do think that it would be better practice if these exhibits were publicly posted along with the agenda. And that's never been a practice of the board. And I still am not sure why that's not a practice of the board. But to me, when the board agenda goes up, the board packet should go up unless there's something that's redacted for, like executive session or something like that.
I agree.
So anyway, that's not what you asked for, but there it is. And maybe that's something to talk about in maybe a full retreat and once we have it. Anyway, the changes are largely about about term limits and elections. And and before I get into that, I'll talk about just a couple small things. There was some Shipman and Goodwin, our attorneys reviewed these and also made some clarifications to the policy that are outside of the bounds of what I'm about to talk about, that are ensuring that we are in alignment with the state statute, as I described earlier. For example, we've just burdened the secretary with an additional duty of reporting to the town at its annual meeting the doings of the board. That's a quote from the policy and a quote from the statute. So there are some things like that that are updated that probably should have always been in the policy or in one of the three policies that we're talking about here. So the three policies, which are titled Organization of the School Board, Board Organizational Meeting, and Board Officers, are proposed to be amended primarily so that there would be an election annually, to be described somehow in the future as the second meeting in November or something like that, as Diane is suggesting. And that folks who are serving as executive members of the board, either in the chair, vice chair, or secretary positions, would be up for election annually, and that folks would be able to nominate or renominate or vote accordingly. And that it's what I'm calling a 1+1 format, where individuals could serve for up to 2 years in a seat before moving either to a different seat on the executive committee or off the executive committee entirely, or they could serve 1 year if that is the will of the board at that point. So it's a term limit of 2 years, but an election every year.
Thank you. That's helpful. Well, I imagine it's helpful. I would like to just share with the full board the comments that I made earlier in committee about this bylaw change. So a revision of a board bylaw are necessarily complex and should only be entertained with great care. There are five distinct phases of bylaw revisions to be considered: development, discussion, adoption, and review. I believe this change in our bylaws deserves time to be fully developed and vetted, and if necessary, revised. When I first saw this proposal, I was excited about it. I mean, as the person currently serving as chair, and the only person on the board who has served as chair, I can tell you it's a daunting job. In the best of circumstances, it requires many hours working at central office, responding to community stakeholders, commenting to the press, communicating with other elected officials, etc. The idea of sharing that responsibility in a more efficient and bipartisan way has great appeal to me. However, after I thought a little bit more about it, I think there are some really real and potentially unimagined consequences that could occur with this change. And I think this board needs to carefully weigh the benefits and risks of codifying this proposal. If we take shortcuts during the process, we do so at the risk of any of these pitfalls I talked about. Some key points I would ask us to consider during our deliberations are: is 1 year enough for the chair to be effective, or the executive board members? As chair, I can say that despite significant hours and complete dedication to the task, it took at least 6 to 9 months for me to be better acquainted with the roles and responsibilities that I'd taken on. The more experienced, other more experienced resources that I reached out to echoed this concern. Nick Caruso, the senior staff associate at CABE, cautioned that a one-year term, quote, doesn't allow for building relationships. Plus, the learning curve to become an effective chair could easily encompass the better part of a year. One thing that a chair needs is credibility with the community, and that takes time to build. And the second thing is, I think we will lose important continuity, as he mentioned in his statement to me, as a governing board. Continuity is crucial to the district. This year may be more important than ever as we're facing a difficult budget season, a looming facilities referendum, and ongoing COVID-19 considerations. All this with a new superintendent. Mr. Mastaro, who works as the CABE Senior Staff Associate for Policy Services, when I reached out to him, said, as a former superintendent, I would prefer a term longer than 1 year for the chairperson based on building a relationship of trust. This trust, in my experience, goes beyond the office of the superintendent, but has also been important with the police department, Madison Youth and Family Services, the First Selectman's Office, and other elected officials, and the Board of such as the Board of Finance. The current bylaw states that board officers will serve for a term of 2 years and until a successor is elected. So there's nothing in the current bylaws that says a chair can't resign sooner if necessary or preferred. For these reasons, I am struggling, although I'm trying to keep an open mind in the way that this proposal is written. It seems like a solution in search of a problem. I believe this lengthy and intensive undertaking can take away from the important transition our district is about to undergo with the start of our new superintendent. I further believe the bylaws as they exist now include allowances that already address the concerns of this proposal. So I'm grateful that the policy committee is looking to have a special meeting. I think it would be great to discuss this more. I think it's worthy of our time. I wish it wasn't happening at a time where there's so many other things on our plate, but nonetheless, I'm grateful for that recommendation, and I hope that we will take advantage of it. Thank you.
Katie, 2 points of clarification. One, you mentioned the policy committee considering having a special meeting. That's different than what I understood. The board would have a special meeting because if the policy committee did, not everyone could participate.
No, it's just I'm sorry if I misspoke. What I meant to say was the policy committee was recommending another time to discuss this.
Got it. You just want to make sure that we're all able to be present and discussing. The other thing I'll say is in terms of how the policy was written as we're having this discussion, I just want folks to have a sense of the reason for the approach and what I think ended up being a compromise within the policy committee that got it to this point of a 1+1 format. The 2-year term limit, I think, is important to folks, and it's been raised here as being important to share the burden of an overwhelming task to be in any of the seats really, but especially the chair on the executive committee. So I don't think that that's necessarily what we're discussing. I think a big part of this is probably, do you have an election every year or not? And I will continue to assert that one of the things that's been absent from my perspective and in other perspectives that I've heard in response to this policy as folks have raised ideas about it, is that there hasn't necessarily been an opportunity to voice one's opinion about the structure of the executive committee in a regular fashion. A great example was brought up, Diana, and I hope you don't mind that I raise this, but the idea that if you have, in the way that the policy is written right now, you're going to be electing a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary if you are a new member to the board immediately upon arrival. And you might not know the folks or really what the work is like or what you're even voting on really, and might not have a sense of that. And the election every year allows folks to weigh in again, to have more time under their belt to think about whether or not that's working for them, whether they feel represented by that executive committee, or whether or not they think it's time for a change. So I think that's all it does. Ideally, we would have, even under this proposed policy revision, folks serving for 2 years every time. and that people wouldn't resign early, as we've seen in the past, or need to shift. And I think that all this does is present an opportunity to make sure that we're hearing the entirety of the board on a regular basis in a way that's uniform rather than contentious, something that's just a regular opportunity for folks to weigh in and talk and deliberate. So that's the reason that I sat on a Sunday and wrote a bunch of this at one point, is because for both of those reasons, both because I know that there's a burden that seems unfair as it's currently written, but also that I know folks want to raise their voice in a way that's conducive to board operations.
Katie, I have just a comment on that. So when I first heard this policy, I liked it for the same reasons that you did. I thought it was bipartisan and everything, and I think most people on the board know, I actually landed exactly where you landed, having sat on the board. I do think the continuity is so important. I think that it does take a while. There's initiatives that we have that take leadership that's going to go longer. And the other problem that I foresee, which I've raised before, is I do think it's going to end up being like basically a chair football, because I don't think on a board of 9 people, you generally have more than 2 people who would be interested in being chair at any given time. So I just worry it's just going to get tossed back and forth from person to person who wants to do it. So I hear what you said, and I'm completely in alignment with you. I look forward to discussing it more with the board, but I'm sitting exactly where you're sitting at this point.
I had trouble unmuting. I just wanted to say that one of the things that appealed to me about this was the idea that you would have board members sitting on the board as regular board members who were chairpersons previously, so that there is experience on the board to help guide the current chairperson. Because it seems like right now there's just one, and then if you left, we would have none. And
I tried to make Jean Fitzgerald stay, and she wouldn't. Here we are.
I really like the idea of having someone who sat in that seat to help the next person and guide them, or someone to go to with, hey, how do I do this? I'm not really sure. And I really like that. And it kind of goes across the board as well, because the committee chairs also follow the same pattern, so that if you've never been a chair, that you would have someone who was a chair already there, so that you have someone to guide you and someone with experience. So that was the one thing that really appealed to me, especially as a new board member who has so many questions. And the second thing that appealed to me was that it is such a daunting task. I don't think I would ever want to be chair, because you do so much work and I don't want any part of that. So thank you for your hard work and dedication. But I also want to say that I think that when people say, well, would I want to be chair, knowing that it's 2 years, I'd be like, nah, I don't want to commit for 2 years. But if you opened it up to 1 year with the option to do it for 2 years, that they might say, okay, I could try it for 1 and see how I do. And then you get in the groove and okay, I could do it for a second, as opposed to being like 2 years, not for me. And so I think it might, open up the possibility to other board members who would normally say no, thank you, to maybe they would.
I won't belabor this because I think this is exactly why we need to have a longer retreat to discuss this in isolation. But I think I couldn't agree more with everything that you said. My fear is kind of looking on the flip side, that now you've got somebody who's said, oh, I can do this for another year. And there's already people lining up to be in succession. And then do we have more politics than are necessary on the board that take away from the other important work of the district? So I totally hear everything you're saying. And that was my initial reaction. I fear the continuity piece, and then I fear the constant turnover and milling among board members. But I am all for shared labor and dividing things up more equitably. I think we'd all be better for that.
Katie, if I could, this is just for our later discussion. I'd be interested in knowing, separate from all this, is this model in place currently somewhere else, and what has the experience been? So I think we should if that's, Greg, you mentioned writing this on a Sunday. I don't know if you pulled it out or if you modeled after something else, but I think we're talking hypothetically about both what our current experience is internally and also what we think might work. But if there is a model that's in place that employs this 1-to-1, 1+1, I'd really be interested, particularly if it's a district that mirrors ours, what the experience has been like, pro or con. I think that would be important to look at.
Tom, just to answer that, the 1+1 came out of committee discussion. So it's different than the original proposal. So there is no district that I'm aware of that has this exact model. And that's one of the reasons that I think, it's a great idea, as has been raised, to have the luxury of both Dr. Pattyfoot and Dr. Cook in the room to give their opinion about places they've been and things that they've seen, because I don't know that we're going to get a lot of people have been asking for what you're raising, Tom, and I don't think it exists.
Okay, that's helpful. And
And
I
that's
agree.
kind of why I reached out to CABE, Tom, to find out about best practice. And part of why I just wanted to, again, address the process of a bylaw revision and making sure that we're doing due diligence and our research and making sure that this is best practice. And I said this in committee, not that we always have to do what everybody else is doing, but we should make sure we know the reasons why everybody else is doing a certain thing before we change what we're doing. Any more discussion? Greg, is that the end of your report?
That has long since been the end of my report. Top of that, Learn Liaison.
So before we move on to Learn Liaison, so just so I know, Greg and board, should I ask Wendy, I hate to do this to you, but ask Wendy to reach out about availability between now and December 1st for the board? Does that make sense? Okay, I will do that.
I think ideally between now and Monday the 30th, only because we have a meeting on the 1st, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so probably not that night, I'm imagining. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you. Learn Liaison.
No report.
Okay, sorry. So you're finally on Selectman Murphy.
What's that, 2.5 hours later?
How long was
2
your
hours and
meeting
15?
on Monday? I think it was.
And we're done. So thank you, Chairwoman Stein. I appreciate it. So we did have a wonderful meeting earlier this week, and we, I think, made some pretty important decisions with regard to the future of our town. We did implement the start of the charter review, which is going to take input from the charter guidelines committee that sort of started the process, looking at some different forms of government and input from the town. And we approved the charge for the charter review. That is basically the town bylaws, policies of the town, whatever. And we are going to start to get into a pretty detailed review of the charter. And we're looking for volunteers from the town to start getting involved in that process. So that will start within the next couple of weeks. We'll be interviewing and getting volunteers going for that. As Galen and Katie both mentioned, the solar carports were approved by the Board of Selectmen. It began early in September, but 7 responses came back from the RFP process. 2 were interviewed, and the lowest cost provider was selected, I think, for a variety of reasons. There was a whole host of guidelines. Al Goldberg, my colleague, Woody Weiss from the Energy Commission, Fillmore McPherson from the Board of Finance, Bill McMinn from your facilities committee here, and several others were on the committee that were deciding. This is a 20-year PPA, so not insignificant. Obviously, it's going to reduce our operating costs, but more importantly, it is going to drive our overall energy footprint even farther, which we could not be more thrilled about. The company selected was a company by the name of Green Skies. The understanding is that they're going to be a single source provider to deal with So any issues will flow right through them as opposed to potentially a contractor or whatever. So we're pretty excited about where we're going with that. So much appreciation to the Board of Ed for kickstarting the process. We've now approved it, and it's now moving to the Board of Finance. Third point, vacancies. We have plenty of vacancies on boards and commissions in town. So if you know friends and family members that might be interested in these fun volunteer positions that we all love so much, feel free to push folks to the town website. There will be a big fat button that you can click on, download the application. It typically flows through the political parties, but you don't have to be affiliated with a political party. You can absolutely join at any point in time. I know as of this evening, we accepted resignations. Well, on Monday, we accepted resignations from a position from the Madison Youth and Family Services Board. The chair is stepping down, and somebody from Senior Services. But we had a whole host of boards and commissions that have availability. Fourth point, Veterans Ceremony. That was mentioned earlier on your meeting here. There is a service or a ceremony tomorrow on the green at 11 a.m. Social distancing and masks will be worn, but obviously we'll be absolutely focused on our veterans in town who have given service to our country. And then last, certainly but not least, to my friend, to my colleague, and to your board chair, Katie Stein, for all of your hard work, dedication, and most importantly, your heart that you've given to the town and to the Board of Education, to the educators, to the students, to the administrators. Huge appreciation for your service to this community. It is very appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I shouldn't have insulted you at the beginning of your report, had I known. No, I appreciate it. I also want to thank Galen for being voluntold to serve on the solar panel RFP process. I think
Did I forget your name, Galen? Oh, so sorry.
It's all right. It's quite all right.
it was, one more thing. And I also want to just shout out to my fellow chair, Mr. Duena, on the Madison Youth and Family Services Board. It seems like a week where a lot of chairs are turning over. So it's a great time of transition for Madison and very, very exciting. So thank you, Mr. Duena, for your service.
But he's moving though, so you're not moving, right? Not that we know of yet.
Maybe I am. No, I will still be here on the board. So best wishes to you, Tony, and thank you for your service and your time. And thank you, Scott. I'm blushing. Do we have any audience response to information presented? Wendy, do you see anybody's hand raised?
Nobody has their hand raised. Jean has her hand raised. Jean Fitzgerald.
Oh, Jean. I didn't see it.
She's going to be our board chair again?
Please.
All in favor?
She is not going to be the next Julie.
Jean Fitzgerald.
That's how rumors get started.
That is. I love how Scott votes. So I just want to take a minute, being where Katie is, knowing what she's gone through. I do want to take a moment, as Scott said, and just thank you. It's a difficult job, and it is. And, you've done it well. I've enjoyed the time working with you as another elected official, as a chair. And you've taken the ship through very difficult waters, and it's time to hand it over. And I think that's fair. And I think there are great people on the board that you will hand it off to. You're leaving it in good hands, the leadership. But I do think there needs to be a moment to say it is not an easy job, and you certainly wore it well, and you didn't appear that it was difficult, but I do know that it is difficult. So thank you for your time and your service to the town. When you're dealing with people's children, that's so important to them, You can't make everybody happy. You do the best that you can, and that's what you did. So thank you. And enjoy stepping down. And I am jealous as well as grateful for your time.
Wow, thank you, Jean. Coming from you, that means more than you'll ever know. So thank you. I think you put up with me as a regular board member, and you're a mentor to me as a leader in town, and have always been there to take my calls, no matter how painful they have been. So I am very grateful for your kind words. Thank you. All right, so any other audience response? Okay, so moving on to, we're in the home stretch, to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I need a motion to approve $1,326.20 from Hand Music Boosters to the Hand School Music Program to purchase long sleeve shirts for the band so they can play outside as long as possible. Diane? I'm sorry, moved. Second?
I'll second that, Emily.
Discussion?
Well, I'd like to say that was a very thoughtful and timely donation. So that's very generous and well targeted.
Thank you. So with gratitude, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I need a motion to approve $1,500 donation from the Jeffrey PTO to the Jeffrey Elementary School for virtual field trips. Another timely and
So
wonderful.
moved, Diane.
Second, Greg.
Discussion?
Thank
Where are they going to go?
Virtually.
Yeah,
I know, but like
They can
to like
go
to
anywhere.
to the falls. I mean, they go Niagara Falls. Or that's great. I mean, like
I wanna-
museums. You
I
know?
want to say thank you as usual to the Jeffrey PTO for another great donation. But I agree with Galen. This is one of the most futuristic agenda items I've ever seen. Virtual field trips makes me feel like I'm in the future part of Back to the Future.
Agreed. And I hope we get an update on where they went. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you with gratitude. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the October 20th, 2020 Board of Education meeting. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
So I did notice that there was something missing. The original agenda did not have the second community session on it. I think what happened was we had a problem with our breakout room, and Wendy went to go set up fix the Zoom meeting on that. And when we realized it, so then we voted to amend the agenda to include the second community session, but no one actually spoke in it. But I don't remember like who made the motion and who seconded it. And I don't know if anyone else remembers.
So I was not at that meeting, but it is on video and posted to our website. So I'm sure we can get that information and accurately reflect it in the minutes. If the board is comfortable, we can understand that that change will take place in the minutes and approve them as amended to reflect what actually happened. So can I get a motion to approve the amended?
All you have to do is I will accept that friendly amendment to the motion.
Thank you. Second.
Second. Violet.
Thank you, Violet. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm abstaining. Motion carries. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Diane.
Second. Violet.
No,
Scott.
Still can't vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good
Kim.
night.